Welcome to the Musical Prisms podcast with your host, Wayne Fisher. Hello everyone, this is Future Wayne here, and sadly I have to report 2 days after filming this episode of the podcast, the great John Sykes passed away. Rest in peace to his friends and family. Now on to the episode. Welcome to the Musical Prisms podcast. This is Wayne. I am here with Cody from Brockway, Viynyl, Bytes. But to anyone who is new to the channel or has watched in the past, this is where I go into the big intro. He,
right on.
Bishop of Brockway, the prodigy of Prog, the pyromaniac of Prog metal, the guy who goes deep into deep dive, the host of Breaking Prog on Prog Radio, a host so talented he doesn't have one but needs two radio shows. When he plays Monopoly, he converts his hotels into record store chains. Proprietor of Second Chance Records in Caledonia, Ontario, host of Brockway's Viynyl Bytes on YouTube and Prog Radio, it's Cody Brockway.
Woo! I'm so glad to be here, my Canadian compadre.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm grateful to be here with you and to have a hoot. Talk about one of the greatest rock bands ever, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, phenomenal rock band. So before I get into this, as usual, I'll just go through a little bit of information about this record and then we'll get going.
Sure thing.
The album was released January 30th, 1984 in the UK and April 16th, 84 in the US. Has two completely different mixes and different guitar player on the albums and different bass. And I believe it's the same drummer.
Yeah.
The singles off this album are Guilty of Love, Give Me More Time, Standing in the Shadows, and Love Ain't No Stranger. Sadly, after this, Mick Moody left after release, was replaced by John Sykes. Mel Galley had an injury that affected his nerves, which led to David Coverdale pretty much saying it's just not going to work out. John Lord, after this, left to reform Deep Purple Mark II. And this album sold over 10 million copies, which I found interesting for Whitesnake around that time.
Oh, yeah. And not to mention the next album.
Yeah. So, Cody, how did you discover this album?
I don't remember how I guess I would have just heard them through various outlets, and I ended up listening to this album and just falling in love with side one. And I love side two now as well, but side one, immediately you're hit with the 3-song punch. Slide It In, Slow and Easy, and Love Ain't No Stranger. It's likely that I would have heard a lot of this from, you hear it on the TV, and especially if you have Sirius XM like I do, you get Ozzy's Boneyard, and they play this album a lot. All the guys on there, all the DJs like Jim Florentine and all those guys, they constantly pick cuts from this album all the time. So, yeah, I've been a fan of this record for a very long time. I can't remember the first time I heard it. It's been in my life for so long,
Yeah.
And the cover's awesome.
Yeah, I listened to this. Oh, God. I heard Slide It In a couple years ago. I thought that was a killer hard rockin' tune. And then recently I heard Slow and Easy, which another great song. But I thought, you know what? Do this as an episode with you, because I know in the past you said you were a huge Whitesnake fan. So I thought this would be right up your alley. Yeah,
I even like some of their later albums too, like Good to Be Bad and all that stuff. I think Whitesnake have just kind of, David Coverdale has kind of done this thing where he's been consistently really good, and he's always, sure, there's lots of lineup changes, but it was never like there was never any weak links. You know what I mean? It was always like he knew to get the best of the best bands he could possibly assemble. right back to the beginning of Whitesnake. Even when they had Bernie Marsden, R.I.P., who just passed away a couple months ago. Whitesnake has always been, people kind of lump them in with hair bands. I kind of have an issue with that because it's like these guys sound nothing like Motley Crue. It's like, it's just, this is borderline heavy metal. Some people might call it glam metal. I don't know if I would use that term. They're really a heavy blues band that just got heavier as time went on.
Yeah, I can see the I can see the hair metal thing mostly due to the drums. Like the drum sound on this is
and the look of the band, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Cozy Powell on drums. Like, what better drummer to fit into Whitesnake? Because it always felt like Whitesnake at points was kind of like the Deep Purple Rainbow leftover. Because you had John Lord, you had David Coverdale, you had Cozy Powell, who was in Rainbow. Just through the years, really had like kind of a who's who of people playing on it.
They had Ian Pace at one point as well.
Yes, I remember reading
on the way earlier stuff. Yeah, it is very like that marriage of Rainbow and Deep Purple. I never thought of it like that, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, like listening to this, I listened to there's two different mixes you can find, the UK one and the US one. I will say, to my opinion, I like the US version a little more. I find the sound is a lot more full.
It's sharper and punchier, isn't it?
Yeah, and
it's more defined.
Yeah, you can really tell the synth work is starting to really come in, that Here I Go Again punchy synth work. Because I know in between these two, the reason there's two different releases is I believe David Coverdale left his record label with Whitesnake around that time and then signed with Geffen in the US. Yeah. And that's kind of where they broke through. And yeah, fantastic. Now the one I got, it starts with The Gambler as the opening track.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, so what edition do you have?
Not sure. It's one of the Spotify ones. Like, I looked at all of them, and the track order is the exact same on virtually all of them. But it starts with The Gambler, Slide It In, Standing in the Shadows, Give Me More Time, Love Ain't No Stranger, Slow and Easy, Spit It Out, All or Nothing, Hungry for Love, Guilty of Love. So there's.
When he remixed the album, he did this with a lot of their records too. He did this with 1987 as well. He would totally change the entire track list in the running order. But when you grow up with the vinyl editions of these albums, you memorize the way that they are on each side per side, right? So off the top of my head, I know that this one starts off with Slide It In, Slow and Easy, Love Ain't No Stranger. But then all the new editions don't. They're all different. And he changed the sound. So he really remixed stuff on the new ones. I like the 80s production on this with that breathy sort of heavy drums and rock guitar. But on some of the remixed versions, he removed all of that. And it's just dry, straight up hard rock in your face. And that's fine too. But when you get used to the atmosphere of the record, it's like, oh, whoa. Sometimes it really works. Like in the case of Pink Floyd, they did that with A Momentary Lapse of Reason. And I guess it works here too, but I really like the original mix. Yeah.
I actually never minded the original mix of A Momentary Lapse of Reason. It's kind of one of those that people say, oh, it's dated in this, but quite honestly, I think that's somewhat of its charm.
Yeah, it's indicative of a time, right? I love that record, Momentary Lapse. Some people give it a real hard time. I love that record.
It's nowhere near their bottom of their catalog.
No. No, the prog always slips through in these conversations.
Yeah. So looking at it, John Sykes, from Thin Lizzy, Tigers of Pantang, hell of a guitar player.
Yeah.
Like I was listening to some of these guitar mixes and everything on here, and I'm like, man, like, too bad he kind of turned into kind of like one of these guys who never stayed in one situation too long. Because I think if he would have stayed with Whitesnake, it could have really been like they could have been one of the bigger than probably they ended up being. They could have been like up there with still touring stadiums and stuff.
I mean, they do, but it's I find with so many bands when you change lineups so many times, fans kind of get confused. Yeah. It happens a lot, right? But these guys have still held on pretty well. They still here. They'll come with the Scorpions and stuff and do big massive shows. After this, they would have brought in Adrian Vanderberg and then Steve Vai a couple albums later. So that was pretty cool. But this album, the sound of this record, he had just come from doing those albums like Saints and Sinners and stuff that just came before that with original guitarist Bernie Marsden. And then he kind of just decided that I'm just going to let go of pretty much everyone and start over. And, to success, I suppose. I do like those early Whitesnake albums like Love Hunter and all that. But to great success because this was massive. I mean, still Love Ain't No Stranger gets played on the video channels to this day.
Yeah.
And it's still a massive album. There's still people talking about it all the time. Like I said, you can tune into Ozzy's Boneyard pretty much any time and hear most of the songs in this. Like Guilty of Love is one that they throw on sometimes, which is one of my favorite deep cuts that this band ever did. Gambler. Oh no, Gambler. Gambler is like that slow, groovy sort of. I love that tune. Absolute. As Tara would say, it's an absolute banger.
It is.
Guilty and Hungry for Love are kind of like more upbeat. Guilty, yeah, you're guilty. Just a great band, and he is a remarkable singer. He's a great writer, and they have a real style that they kind of adhere to. Even when they sort of change direction, they'll come back with certain songs, and you go, okay, yeah, that's still the bluesy Whitesnake happening here, right?
Yeah.
Not a bad track on this record. Standing in the Shadow, Spit It Out. I wonder what he means by that. Slide it in. Slide it in. Wonder what he means by that too. But yeah, it's a really fresh sounding album. And so when he kind of did what he did with the lineup, it kind of resulted in this brand new sort of way to bring in the new era, so to say.
Yeah, I was listening to certain sections of this album, and you can really tell it's blues-based and even kind of boogie blues-based because on some of these songs, the ZZ Top starts coming out where you can pick out like parts where it's like, man, that sounds like something ZZ Top would do. Like, I think it's one of the songs off here, I was listening to it, and I'm like, that sounds awfully familiar to like Tush in its approach.
Yeah.
And
and even with the slower songs, like you could even compare the beginning of Slow and Easy to something like Jesus Just Left Chicago.
Yeah.
Kind of. A little bit. So I see where you're going with that.
Yeah, and with songs like Slow and Easy, The Gambler, like starting off with that over almost atmospheric synth of John Lord over top the whole keys and giving it this kind of sound that is like, man, that's just, and it goes on for a bit, like even a Slow and Easy, giving it that kind of bluesy intro with just David Coverdale on vocals is just like a chef's kiss. And then then you get the kick drum from Cozy Powell kicking in and really setting it in the people's sight, and then it just goes off. And the song, it's fantastic. Standing in the Shadows is a hell of a song.
Yeah, and you were mentioning about Slow and Easy. That's one of my top favorite hard rock songs ever. ever. That's an absolute classic. Just the riffing in that is wild.
I get more of Whitesnake. I know they get, like you mentioned, the hair metal thing. I get more of David Lee Roth Van Halen with kind of that singing style than I would, let's say, Motley Crue or Poison or a lot of these other bands. And Coverdale. Like, David Coverdale is a phenomenal singer. Like, his power behind his voice is so good, but when he has to be silky smooth, he can do it too.
Have you seen, if you fast forward a couple years to 1990, I guess it was, when Steve Vai was in the band, have you watched that live at Donington concert they have?
No, I haven't.
It's absolutely fantastic. Coverdale's voice, that was probably like him at his like peak.
Oh, wow.
He was just going for it. And, you know, Adrian Vanderberg and Steve Vai sharing a stage together with Coverdale and Tommy Aldridge on drums. Oh
yeah.
My God.
That's one
Steve
thing.
Vai playing a triple neck.
That's one thing I'll say about David Coverdale and Whitesnake. Can you name a bad drummer in that band?
Nope.
Yeah.
No, Cozy Powell, Tommy Aldridge, and no, everyone. I think Tommy still plays with them to this day, actually. I think he's still in the fold. No, you can't. I can't name a bad musician to ever have played in Whitesnake, ever.
Yeah, I feel if David Coverdale felt you weren't really cutting the mustard, you would have been out the door pretty quickly.
And their albums are notoriously very good. And when I say that, you know, like people kind of lump them in with the hair bands, I certainly don't mean that they sound anything like Motley Crue and things like that, because it's just not.
Yeah,
they just don't. But there's a lot of general public that go, "Oh, Whitesnake, they were a hair band from the '80s." It's like, people kind of do that with Mr. Big too. And I'm like, these guys were really like kind of beyond what, not to you know say anything bad about any of these bands, you know, Cinderella and stuff, those guys could play their asses off.
Yeah.
But Whitesnake were not anything like Motley Crue. They didn't portray themselves in the same way that Poison and Motley Crue did. And they were like, you can tell this was just cut from a different cloth than a lot of their contemporaries who were big at that time, you know.
Yeah, and looking at it from a production standpoint,
it's awesome. Martin Birch,
especially the how do I put this? Especially the UK, or not the UK, the US version of this, like the polish put on that. Because I know David wasn't happy with the sound of the UK version of it. He wanted it to be, I think, a lot more fuller. And when he went to Geffen, he got that big full sound he was really looking for.
Oh yeah, and I mean Martin Birch. Now there's a topic. Martin Birch, you know, not only did the guy engineer Fleetwood Mac albums, but he was producing Black Sabbath at this time. He was producing Iron Maiden. He did all those classic Maiden albums from the 80s. Every one of them, he did them all up till 92. And so at the time, for this kind of music, he was really in demand. And his production is always outstanding. R.I.P. to him as well. He passed a couple years ago.
Really, really good. Looking at Whitesnake and looking at 80s music in general, I think there is a kind of generalization to the whole thing. That, especially when it comes to production, but I think Whitesnake kind of is above that from what I listened to it. That
even when they did ballads.
Yes, it's not the schmaltzy Home Sweet Home or big epics like November Rain or anything like that. It's like there's still an element to Whitesnake where it's a rock band. We're just gonna rock.
Their attitude is genuine.
Yeah.
And you know, there's a certain amount of genuineness here that, from other bands at the time, you listen to their records and you don't get that same feeling, that same powerful, genuine, real raucous, attitude. It's like if you put this up against something like Poison, not to say that they're bad musicians or anything like that, but this stands head and shoulders above something like that to me.
Yeah,
because this is real.
Yes, and
it's real.
Yeah, and it's really one of those albums where, I love it. It's a hard rock album. It's not trying to be something it's not. Even as a prog fan, I appreciate a lot of these hard rock albums because I'm it doesn't have to be over the top musicianship. My dad always told me a good song is a good song, and song comes first sometimes. And
it, man. We love metal around here.
Yeah.
Prog and metal are prog, classic rock, progressive rock, hard rock, and then metal in pretty much all of its forms. Just, gimme.
Yeah. I do like it, though, that they do keep that bluesy element to this band. Because, oh, man, I was listening to this. I remember, what's the other one I listened to? I listened to the title track Love Hunter before to that album. And I'm like, man, these guys are good. It's just everything I hear. I'm kind of you know what? I like that.
That Love Hunter is a really good album. It's going back to 1979, I think. And there's a song on there called Walking in the Shadow of the Blues.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yes. We're not worthy, man.
Alice Cooper, we're not worthy.
It's so good. It's so good.
So I did this with Tara. I've done this with Tom. If you had to give this album a grade out of 10, what would you give it?
That's a hard one. I wouldn't say it's a 10 out of 10, despite the fact that it's probably my second favorite Whitesnake record.
Yeah.
I'd probably 6.5 or a 7.
Oh wow. I went 8. I really enjoy this record. There's a couple songs. It's more the ballady stuff on here that I'm not a huge fan of at times, but I think the rest of it is so strong, especially the rocking.
I think I could, I think a 7 or an 8, maybe depending on how I'm feeling. A 7 or an 8 would be appropriate for me too. Yeah, I'd match your answer with that, actually.
Yeah, I did it with Tom, and it's for Neil Young, it kind of fit, because it's a lot more of a singer-songwriter, and gave our grades. But this one is surprisingly, I'm why haven't I listened to this before doing this? It's this is such a great record.
It is. If you can get a vinyl copy on a really good stereo system, your neighbors will love you.
Yes.
Take it from me. I definitely put this at a 7 or an 8. Somewhere in between those two. Not quite a 10, but there's certain songs on here that just absolutely stood the test of time and became some of the greatest hard rock songs ever, and then some with the next record too.
Yes.
That one's probably a 9 or even a 10. That one's probably a 10. But this one is really, really close. That's why it's my second favorite.
Yeah, it's funny that it's the album before the big one. And
but it's amazing. We've kind of covered everything about the songs are all fantastic. Yeah. The production is fantastic. There's no skips on this. But it's an 8. It's an 8 from me.
What would you say is the standout track, the track everybody should go listen to from this?
Oh, I'm going to say, because there's a couple, actually, I have quite a few in mind for that. The title track, depending on how horny you are, maybe Slow and Easy, Love Ain't No Stranger. Those were all big singles for them from this, and those are some of the band's most defining tracks overall. So I'd say one of those 3 songs.
Okay. Yeah, it's
if you want to get into the deep cuts, Spit Out and Guilty of Love. But if I was to say, like just one song, listen to this. You're a hard rock fan, you got to hear this. Probably Slow and Easy.
Yeah,
it has that anthemic pumping chorus, that awesome. It's great. It's great.
Yeah, that's one thing I loved about Cozy Powell being on this album, is you get those stark contrasts of him just at one point just dead stop, and then going back and drumming and stopping, and allowing it to breathe a lot.
Yeah, this album and this band does very tasteful things like that. Now, what would your song be to like show to like a noob, like, or a newbie to this album or the band?
The one that really sticks out to me, Standing in the Shadows. Love that song. Like it has like that hard rock and edge to it. It's kind of a song of its time, but it kind of translates as you go along. Like,
well, the production is so fresh too that it stands the test of time. It really does.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, Cody, what should everyone be looking forward on Brockway's Vinyl Bytes, your radio shows?
Well, I do 2 radio shows, as you mentioned. Thank you. Yep. I do 2 radio shows every Thursday. One of them is at www.progradio.com. Every Thursday at 12 noon Eastern. Of course, if you're on the Pacific, that's 9 a.m. And Wayne, what time would that be? 10:30 for you?
10
o'clock. Okay, yeah. But if you're on the Eastern Standard Time, that's 12 noon Eastern here. I do a 2 or 3 hour show on Prog Radio every week, and then also every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Of course, 5 if you're on the Pacific, and 6 if you're where Wayne is in Alberta. I do a 3-hour show on deepnuggets.com. That's www.deepnuggets.com. And Brockway's Vinyl Bytes, we're going to be having more cool content coming soon. Tara will be joining me once again on the channel for some fun. And we'll be talking about lots of music stuff, and hopefully get back to putting some drum covers up.
Yes.
Wayne, I love what you've been doing on your channel, brother.
Yeah, it's been fresh. I thought about really what's something different I could do, and this kind of came to mind and decided, you know what? Let's do these kind of podcast episodes with people I've met on the Prog Corner, even been reaching out to people from different channels, seeing if it'd be something they'd be interested in doing, and just kind of see where it goes from there.
I love the idea of doing these album dives, and I will come on anytime you want. I'll be there if you need it. I love doing these, and we should do this one sometime.
Yes.
Hint, it's a 10.
For me, though, my favorite Metallica album is the one after it, Injustice for All. That's which is surprising because it's like, well, people are like, there's no bass on the album, but I'm like, the songwriting on it is so good that it kind of really is its own thing.
I find that album, not gonna say it's a Prog album, but it has Prog elements to it, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree.
I think it's I know what's the album that came out. Trying to remember what was Death Magnetic.
Yeah.
That had like, I was looking at this and I'm like, what are they trying to be, Pink Floyd with every song over 10 minutes?
Yeah. Well, the arrangements are very complex on that. But yeah, I'm really glad that we got to dig into this record and talk about this today. Thanks for having me on, man.
Oh, no,
I love this record.
For everyone listening, watching, Check out Brockway's Vinyl Bytes. I'll leave all the links to everything down below so you guys can check it out. Cody and his many projects.
Yeah.
Once again, everybody, thank you so much for watching. It really does mean a lot, and I'll see you next time.